Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm David Rooney, publisher of the Revelstoke Current, and welcome to In Conversation, our periodic discussion of all things political. And our guest today is our MP, David Wilks of the Conservative Party of Canada. David, welcome to In Conversation, and welcome to Revelstoke again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rooney.
Mr. Rooney, oh my, I sound
David.
old.
David?
My dad was Mr. Rooney.
There you go, yeah.
So, you've been here in town making a fairly major announcement with regards to federal money coming here to the riding.
Yeah, so this morning we were up at Monashi Point, our outlook, announcing for Parks Canada $156 million in funding for Mount Revelstoke and for Glacier National Park, of which there are a number of projects that Parks Canada will deal with. Specifically, the large one is $77 million, which they will deal with avalanche mitigation. They'll work with Canadian Armed Forces, as well with the Canadian Avalanche Center as well, to do a lot of the projects that they're going to move forward. They're very delighted with that portion of the funding because it'll take them to the highest level that they can to mitigate, to the best of their ability, avalanches through Glacier and Mount Revelstoke.
Well, that'll be great for the winter, but there's also a fair amount of money that's going to be spent on the road surfaces, both within the park, on the Trans-Canada, and the road up to Meadows in the Sky as well.
That's correct. So a lot of the resurfacing for up to the Meadows will be completed hopefully this year. With regards to the Trans-Canada Highway, there are 4 bridges that are going to be taken care of, Wolseley Bridge, as well as 3 bridges that go over the El Silhouette. Most of them are in the Glacier National Park. And then we'll have resurfacing, we'll have rock stabilization as well. But you know, the bigger ones for me that I've really pushed for in Ottawa was to ensure that we got adequate bathroom facilities at Rogers Pass that have been, in my opinion, really lacking in the last few years. So they've had a temporary structure there, as you know, at the top, which is embarrassing. And I'm glad to see that they are going to be putting a permanent structure there that will be much better. But the big one for me is the lighting in the tunnels. I have pushed hard for that for the last 4 years, and I'm so happy to see that those tunnels are being lit, because that is a significant safety problem. And I think that once you see all of those tunnels lit, it's going to be impressive. And I'm glad to see that will be done this year.
I think a lot of people here in Revelstoke will be glad of that. Many of our viewers will remember that there was a fairly major traffic accident in one of the tunnels back in, I think, 2000 or 2001, in which some people died. There were tourists actually on a tour bus, so that people will be quite glad of that. It's about time, you know. It's amazing that something that seems to be almost common sense takes years to get done.
Yeah, the bureaucracy rolls slowly, and you have to constantly push it, and that's what I've been doing, and that's what I believe the job of the Member of Parliament is to continually just push the projects, and eventually you're successful, and you just got to be persistent and never give up. And so the lighting project took 4 years, but it's now done. Every year I go to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Environment pushing for significant funding for the Trans-Canada Highway through the national parks. This year I made a submission for $5 billion with regards to the 20 of the Trans-Canada Highway. I'm very grateful that we're going to be receiving significant money, 156 today, and then announcements in the next few days for Yoho and Kootenay as well, that will improve their infrastructure, both on highway and off highway, trail maintenance, etc., stuff like that at Yoho and Kootenay. So, but you have to be persistent, and hopefully you get it over time.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll cross our fingers and hope to see more of it in the years to come.
Me too.
Yeah. I'll bet. Now, we're in mid-July. We're going to be going to the polls at some point in the next 3 months.
In 96 days.
96 days. Now, I know you don't have a pipeline to the Prime Minister's thinking necessarily, but How soon do you think a writ might be dropped?
Well, the Prime Minister and his entourage have opportunity to call whenever they want, but historically, the longest writ period has been 74 days. That's historically, and that was many years ago. I don't know. I do know that in all likelihood, the very last day it would be called would be September 13th. That would be 36 days back. But you have the option to go back 70 days. And that determination will be made by the Prime Minister and his team, of which I really have no input into it. But I'm looking forward to when the writ drops and we get on the campaign trail.
How challenging do you think this campaign is going to be?
It's going to be much more challenging than it has been in the past. The riding boundaries have changed, bringing in parts of the West Kootenays, including Salmo, Nelson, Kaslo, and a lot of the regional district of Central Kootenay, but losing the cusp, which will now go over to the what is now called BC Southern Interior, but will soon be called, I think, South Okanagan, West Kootenays, or something like that. Yeah, this is going to be a lot different, and I have no misconception of how this is going to be much different.
Yeah.
So I will be working very diligently and very hard over the next 96 days to ensure that I get re-elected on October 19th.
Of course, your opponents, primarily Wayne Stetsky, the NDP, and Bill Green of the Green Party, and Don Johnson from the Liberals, are going to be working just as hard to ensure that that doesn't happen.
That's their job.
That's their job. That's right. This is a real challenge to all candidates, not just you, but all of them. There's a lot more territory to cover, and 20,000 additional people. That really changes the kind of political equations we've gotten used to in Kootenay Columbia.
It certainly has. To go from one end of the riding to the other right now is about 10 hours one way. So that's from Elkford to Edgewood right now. Geographically, it gets bigger because you're bringing in the Nelson, Salmo, and Kaslo from a perspective of population. It also brings in the East Shore. So Johnson's Landing, which I was up there yesterday, and Argenta and Meadow Creek, which will stay in, and Trout Lake, which will stay in, but Nakusp will come out. So yeah, irregardless of who the MP is, it's a big riding. And so, as you know, I try to get to Revelstoke 3 or 4 times a year if I can. And that in itself, you know, you have to ensure that you maximize your time when you're doing that. So to try and just drive from Cranbrook to Revelstoke and then return to Cranbrook is not logical. You have to do Cranbrook, Invermere, Radium Hot Springs, Gold, and Revelstoke, and then swing back around, and what you'll end up doing is a Kaslo, Nelson, Salmo, Creston, make the loop, and then just continually make the loop, and then Cranbrook and Kimberley, because they're in close proximity, are far easier to deal with from the perspective of that's where my office is, so I can deal with that a little easier.
Of course, it's the biggest city in the riding, and it's going to carry a lot of weight.
It is the largest city. Cranbrook is by far the largest city in all of the East and West Kootenays. Approximately 25,000 people. Is the hub of the East Kootenays, as Nelson is the hub for the West Kootenays. And there's a lot of commonality. I think that I think people would be surprised, you know, when they see the commonality when it comes to the forestry industry, when it comes to tourism. A lot of links between the two, and I know that there was a lot of concern when the riding was drawn up the way it was, but the commission had a real challenging job to do, because the Kootenay Columbia riding, as it is right now, borders Alberta and borders the United States. So there's only one way for it to go, and that's west. And there's only 2 highways. So you can either go the northern route through the Trans-Canada, and to try and get 20,000 people would have probably meant Sicamous and most, but maybe not all of Salmon Arm. Right, so that would have been a challenge. So I believe the commission looked at it and went, well, it makes more sense for us to go to the south, and that's what they did. And that's fine by me. It is what it is.
Now, you've been visiting down towards Nelson quite a bit. Are you here, let's talk a bit about what you're hearing in terms of the citizenry. What concerns are people bringing to you, both here in the traditional part of Kootenay Columbia, as well as down there in the new part?
Certainly the economy is probably the largest one for Nelson. They're trying to find that balance between commercial, light industrial, and the tourism aspect of it. Salmo and Caslow have really struggled because the forestry industry could be more vibrant. The ILMA, or the Interior Lumbermen's Interior Lumbermen's Manufacturing Association, doing a fantastic job, whether it's Klesnikoff or Hushcroft or any of the private small owners, to ensure that they employ as many local people as they can. But they're getting tighter and tighter with their tree farm licenses, and they need to be able to access their timber. And so I think Nelson is doing a good job of trying to find that balance. But geographically, they're in an interesting area, because from the perspective of whether it's rail, air, or land, it's a challenging area to get in and out of. So you have to find that mix, and I think there's some great opportunities, but we have to be patient, and we have to just see what works.
Are we hearing the same kind of comments from people in this part of the valley?
Well, certainly for Revelstoke and Golden, the main topic is the Trans-Canada, and there's no arguing that. It's my main focus. As I say, every year I put a submission forward to the Minister of Finance. The challenge is with the Trans-Canada Highway, and I think everyone knows that, is that we've taken all of the low-hanging fruit, and we've fixed as much as you can on the low-hanging fruit, and now it's all the tough stuff. And this tough stuff is not cheap. If you look at just a good example would be the last 5 miles east of Golden, which has not been done. In 2010 dollars, it's $640 million to do 5 miles. It's a lot of money. And then the federal government and the provincial government have to find partnership on that. Then when you look at the national parks, the federal government is solely responsible for the Trans-Canada Highway, and in 2012 dollars, that was about $5 billion. So, but my goal is to convince the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Environment that we need to start, and we just keep moving. And because even if I provided a contractor with $5 billion in March, I don't expect them to complete the whole project by September. That's not possible. But if we stretch it over that 25, 30 years, or maybe even more. I don't know how long it takes to do 122 kilometers of the most challenging piece of the Trans-Canada Highway in all of Canada that's not complete yet. It's not going to be easy, but we need to start. And so every year I do my best to keep that happening. I was happy last year. I was able to get $50 million to repave the Trans-Canada through Mount Revelstoke. I think it made a big difference because there were some interesting potholes from time to time. So those things, people will say, well, it's a quick fix, but it needed to be done anyways.
Okay. Bill C-51 is going to play a role in this coming election, at least as far as some of your opponents are concerned. How good is this bill or this act in your view? Is it going to achieve the goals it wants?
I believe it is. I've read C-51 a lot of times. I sat on the committee when they were going clause by clause. I believe that the most important part of that bill is information sharing between CSIS, CBSA, the RCMP, and other federal agencies that they can't do now. They couldn't do before. And that's the most important part about any form of investigation, whether it's the RCMP, CBSA, CSIS. They have to be able to share information. It's all fine and dandy for one organization to have it if the other organization doesn't know, but they're working on the same subject matter. They need to be able to share that. It's very defined in C51 what CSIS can and cannot do with regards to making application before a judge, that everything is reviewed by the judge. These are Supreme Court justices. I mean, I myself have done two wiretap investigations, and it is really scrutineered. I mean, these are not things that the judge just goes, here you go. They scrutineer it, and prior to even getting there, internally everyone is reviewing it to make sure that you don't do anything wrong, because the last thing that anyone wants is to create bad case law. No policeman wants to do that. No CSIS person wants to do that. No CBSA member wants to do that. They want to have a good investigation that can withstand a charter argument, that holds up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which this bill does. It does that. It's clear in there that they cannot breach, and if they're going to breach, they must go before a Supreme Court justice and justify to that judge what they're going to do. It's still, I've heard the argument, well, the CSIS will become a police power. They have no police powers. They cannot arrest, and then they cannot charge. Their job is to conduct investigations with regards to terrorism, and then if there is enough information to move a charge forward, then they pass that information on, in all likelihood, to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who will then pursue the criminal charges. And that's how it works. I'm comfortable with it. It's a very good bill, and it is, in my opinion, not far-reaching. When I hear the NDP candidate, the one thing that I always think of, the NDP, if their fight is with CSIS, our fight is with ISIS. Our fight is with the terrorism groups, not only within Canada, but outside of Canada. And we have to recognize that we have about 140 to 160 people that have left Canada to go fight in places like Syria and joined ISIS. And the outcome for those people is pretty bleak. Let's be blunt here. This is not going to turn out well for them. But the other challenge we have is if they do survive over there and they come back, there has to be a mechanism in place to be able to monitor those people, because they've obviously been radicalized, and it's going to be we need to have those things in place. And I think Bill C-51 finds the balance and makes it work relatively well for all Canadians.
Do you think your average Canadian understands this? Do you think they understand security thinking, the kind of mindset that goes with that? And they understand the meaning of intelligence gathering? Because there has been controversy, say in Ontario, in Toronto, with regards to carding, which has been a practice. I remember getting carded as a teenager, and it didn't bother me, because I understood what it was about, but a lot of people don't get it.
Well, yeah, I think the best way that I can explain it from my previous career is that whether it's the RCMP or the OPP or Toronto City or CSIS or CBSA, they collect data, and right now they don't share it. They just keep it. But that data is integral to them for investigations, and it may not be for an investigation that is ongoing, but it may be something that's part of a bigger picture, and it gives them the opportunity to put the puzzle together. The average Canadian, I think, understands that the focus of our government is to ensure that those that are involved in terrorism, either at home or abroad, that are a significant threat to the way we live, is something that they accept, and they understand that. And the average Canadian will never be affected by C-51. It's very clear what it says in there, and it's very clear what it has to entail. And I would strongly urge those that have not seen the bill. You can see the summary of the bill. If you go to the website and just Google C-51, it'll come up. But go to the actual government website and read the bill.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how many people actually do that, but
We'll see.
you can't make an informed decision if you're not informed.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be two sides to the story.
Mhm.
There's going to be the side of what we're trying to do as a government, and then there's the side of the opposition that is saying, oh, you've gone too far. So Canadians have to look at both sides and balance it, what they believe is how they want the country to move forward.
Okay.
And I believe that C-51 has found a balance.
I would tend to agree myself, having read it. And I would think that our national security is an important issue and not one to be just dealt with in a flip manner. But it's going to form part of the discussion during the campaign.
Correct.
And yeah, I'm sure you're going to have more than this opportunity to talk about it in public.
I believe I will.
Yeah, I'm sure you will
Yeah.
too. What there has been there have been suggestions by one of your opponents that you're not going to participate in debates during the election in this riding. Do you have any comments to make with regards to that?
Certainly do. I can tell you that the election is still 96 days away, and I will change focus directly to the campaign once the writ is dropped. But prior to the writ being dropped, I have to fulfill my mandate as a member of Parliament for Kootenay Columbia, which does mean, as I have been doing since the House rose about 3.5 weeks ago now, traveling at the constituency, doing funding announcements as I have done today, and will continue to do for the next 2 or 3 weeks, because there's a significant amount of funding coming out. And I was recently interviewed and saying, well, isn't this pork belly politics? But the reality is the budget was not passed until into the very early parts of June, and all of that money needs to be dispersed. And it needs to, and because this is unique this year, because we're going into an election year, as most people would know, once the writ is dropped, no spending can happen. Everything stops. So it's important that the government fulfill its mandate from the perspective of the budget and get the money out so that people like Parks Canada, like the Armed Forces, like CAS that I did down in the Trail, can start moving forward with their projects. Just because we go into an election year doesn't mean that the money, that everyone stops. The process still has to move forward. So we need to be able to provide these people with their funding so they can continue on while we go through an election cycle. With regards to the debates, I've been very clear that once the writ is dropped, my campaign team and I will get together. We will decide what we are going to do, and we'll move forward. I have no concerns about not coming to debates. I'll do what the campaign team wants to do, but you have to formulate how you're going to move throughout the riding too. And so I don't want to tell my campaign team one thing and then they decide to do something else. We're going to work as a team, and I won't be dictated by the NDP candidate on when and where we're going to do all of these debates. And maybe he should focus on ensuring that he tells Canadians how some of the NDP platform is going to be created, such whether it be a minimum wage of $15, whether it be a national daycare system, which is going to cost $1.5 billion a year to put that into place. $1.5 billion. Then we have a $20 billion carbon tax. Let's talk about that for a while. Let's talk about all the issues on the platform of the NDP. And then we can do that at debates or any other place. But let's talk about that.
Excellent. David, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you very much, David Rooney.
And thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure we'll be talking to David again soon, perhaps sooner rather than later.
Perhaps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.